He thought she was just a driver, just another chauffeur behind the wheel. But when the truth came out, he realized he'd been sitting in the back seat of power all along. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Black Journey and help us reach 1,000 subscribers for more powerful, real-life stories. The evening sun draped the city in soft gold, its glow bouncing off glass towers, and sleek metal cars lined up outside the Wellington Grand Hotel, a place where wealth wore perfume and arrogance smiled in tailored suits. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom idled near the entrance, its chrome grille gleaming like a crown. Behind the wheel sat Naomi Lewis, her posture upright, her hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. She was in her early 30s, elegant, composed, her deep brown skin radiant in the fading light. Her braided bun was neat, her eyes steady. She looked like a woman who understood silence better than words. The hotel doors swung open, and out came Richard Harlow, a man who moved like he owned the pavement. Mid-40s, white, perfectly groomed, expensive suit hugging his frame. Every step carried the arrogance of money. He glanced at the Rolls-Royce, impressed for a second, until his eyes landed on Naomi. "You're the driver?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Naomi gave a polite nod. "Yes, sir. Your ride is ready." He chuckled, adjusting his watch. Didn't know they were hiring models as chauffeurs now. His tone was smooth, but sharp, the kind that cut behind a smile. "You sure you can handle a car like this?" Naomi simply smiled. That professional, emotionless kind of smile that reveals nothing and protects everything. She stepped out to open the back door for him, her movements fluid, practiced. Richard slid into the back seat, still smirking. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "A Rolls-Royce in your hands. Hope you don't scratch it." The words hung in the air, heavy with quiet insult. Naomi closed the door gently, circled back to the driver's seat, and slipped behind the wheel. She didn't flinch, didn't speak. The Rolls-Royce started with a deep, smooth purr, the kind of sound that silenced lesser engines. As they pulled away from the hotel, the city lights began to bloom, bright, electric veins running through glass and steel. Inside, the only sound was the soft hum of the road beneath the car. Richard checked his phone, occasionally glancing at her reflection in the mirror, expecting a reaction. But Naomi's eyes never met his. To him, she was just a chauffeur, another worker, another story he'd forget before dinner. But to her, this wasn't just another ride. This was patience in motion. Every turn she took was precise, every stop smooth. There was a quiet strength in her stillness, the kind that unsettled men who built their pride on being seen. The Rolls glided through the streets, and for a moment, Richard shifted uncomfortably in the back seat. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way this woman made luxury look like it belonged to her. Naomi's lips curved slightly, not in arrogance, but in quiet confidence. She had driven this car before. She had been here before, and tonight, the road would lead him to a truth he'd never forget. The streets of downtown shimmered under the orange hue of dusk as the Rolls-Royce Phantom glided effortlessly through the lanes. Quiet, elegant, untouchable. Inside, the world felt sealed away. No noise, no chaos. Just the low hum of the engine and the rhythm of restrained breathing. Naomi Lewis kept her focus ahead, hands steady on the steering wheel. Her movements were fluid, graceful, the kind of precision that only came from experience. Yet, behind her, Richard Harlow lounged in the back seat like a man born to be served. He scrolled his phone, chuckled occasionally, and looked up at her reflection in the mirror. "So," he began, "how long have you been doing this?" Naomi's eyes flickered briefly to the rearview mirror. "Driving, sir?" "Yes, this," he said, waving his hand vaguely. "Driving rich folks around. Must be a fun gig, sitting behind the wheel of cars you'll never own." His tone was light, but the sting in his words was sharp. Naomi didn't respond. The city lights streaked across her face as they passed a row of boutiques. He leaned back, smirking. "You like cars like this, don't you? Must feel nice, even if it's temporary. The leather, the smell, the attention." She stayed silent. The sound of the tires against the road filled the quiet space between them. Richard laughed softly. "You know, when I was your age, I worked my way up. No handouts, no favors. I earned what I drive." He paused for effect. "Can't say the same for everyone these days." Naomi's grip on the wheel tightened slightly, but her composure remained untouched. She had heard this tone before. The casual arrogance of men who mistook money for worth. The Rolls glided through a tunnel, the golden light fading into a wash of shadows. In the dim glow, Richard's reflection shimmered faintly in the mirror, his grin self-satisfied. "You ever dream of owning something like this?" he asked. Naomi's voice was even, calm. "Dreams change with perspective, sir." He chuckled. "Ah, the philosopher driver. You're not like the others, I'll give you that." Silence again. Naomi turned onto a tree-lined boulevard, the city falling away behind them. The hum of the engine and the rhythm of her breathing were the only sounds that dared fill the car. Richard checked his watch impatiently. "Hope we're not late. My time's valuable, you know." "Yes, sir," she said simply. Her tone was polite but distant. The voice of someone who knew her worth didn't depend on anyone's approval. Richard studied her through the mirror, something about her calm demeanor making him uneasy. She didn't flinch. She didn't flatter. She didn't even try to please him. She was just there, steady, composed, untouchable. He shifted in his seat, trying to reclaim control. "You know, attitude can be dangerous in your line of work," he said. "People like me notice it." Naomi smiled faintly. "I'm aware, sir." There was no fear in her tone. No apology. Just truth. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. The car rolled to a smooth stop at a red light. Outside, a couple of pedestrians turned to admire the Rolls-Royce, their phones snapping pictures. Naomi's eyes softened, not from pride, but reflection. She had built her life piece by piece, in silence, with the world doubting her at every turn. She glanced in the mirror again, this time not to see him, but to see herself. The woman she'd become, the patience she'd earned. The light turned green. The Rolls pulled forward, the city skyline rising in the distance like a crown waiting for its queen. Behind her, Richard cleared his throat. "You know, you don't talk much." Naomi's lips curved slightly. "Some conversations don't need words." He frowned, confused, but didn't push further. The truth of her tone unsettled him. As they approached the heart of the financial district, tall glass buildings caught the last rays of sunlight. Naomi turned smoothly into a private lane, lined with luxury cars and a glittering high-rise ahead. Richard leaned forward, peering out. "This where my meeting is?" Naomi didn't answer. Her expression remained calm, almost serene. He looked around, eyes narrowing at the Rolls-Royce insignia stitched in gold on the headrest, the personalized initials engraved on the dash. "Wait, whose car is this?" Naomi didn't look back. "You'll find out soon, sir." And as the Rolls-Royce glided up the driveway, Richard's smirk began to fade, replaced by the faint flicker of confusion, maybe even fear. Because sometimes, silence doesn't just hide truth. It drives it straight toward you. The Rolls-Royce Phantom glided into the private driveway of the Aurora Grand Ballroom, its polished, jet-black body reflecting the evening lights like liquid obsidian. The city's glow faded behind them, replaced by the glittering opulence of high society. Crystal chandeliers, valet attendants in crisp white jackets, and luxury cars gleaming under warm, golden spotlights. Richard Harlow leaned back in the rear seat, still smirking at first, though unease had begun to creep in. The streets, the buildings, the cars, everything screamed wealth. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this ride didn't fit the story he'd created in his mind. Naomi Lewis maneuvered the Rolls-Royce smoothly up the marble ramp. Her calmness was a sharp contrast to his growing tension. She opened the door for him, a practiced motion that carried authority and elegance. "Right this way, sir," she said softly. Her voice was serene, measured, carrying a confidence that unsettled him further. Richard stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks, his eyes scanning the surrounding luxury. "Nice place. I didn't realize I'd be arriving in this level of—" He trailed off, trying to process it all. Before he could finish, a valet approached Naomi, but instead of asking for the car keys, he bowed slightly. "Good evening, Ms. Lewis. The VIP guest packages are prepared. Your arrival is perfectly timed." Richard froze. The words cut through his smug facade. He glanced at Naomi, eyes widening. "Wait, Ms. Lewis?" She turned slightly, a faint smile gracing her lips. "Yes, Naomi Lewis." In that instant, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The Rolls-Royce, the professionalism, the quiet confidence. This wasn't a driver. This wasn't someone who had borrowed a luxury car for a simple ride. She was the CEO's daughter, a co-owner of the company, and one of the most influential figures in the luxury automobile industry. Richard's smirk evaporated. His face paled slightly, disbelief written across every line. He had judged her by her uniform, by her calm silence, by her presence in the driver's seat. Every assumption he had made now crumbled in an instant. You own this?" he stammered, his voice cracking as the reality sank in. Naomi's gaze met his, steady, unflinching. "I do, and I drive when I want to, not when it's convenient for others to notice." The lights of the ballroom reflected off the Rolls-Royce, highlighting her calm authority, her strength, and the dignity she carried effortlessly. Valets, staff, and even a few arriving guests gave her respectful nods, acknowledging her presence. She wasn't just a part of this world. She had helped build it. Richard opened his mouth, searching for words, but none came. The arrogance that had filled him during the ride was gone, replaced by awe and the first flickers of humility. He realized how easily he had underestimated her, how quickly he had let his assumptions cloud judgment. Naomi stepped away from the car, gloved hands adjusting subtly, posture perfect, aura commanding. "It's easy to judge someone from the back seat," she said softly, almost a whisper. "Harder when you realize who's really driving." Richard could only nod, shame and admiration wrestling inside him. He watched as she walked toward the entrance, her presence quiet but undeniable, every step radiating confidence and strength. The city lights reflected off the Rolls-Royce one last time, its polished surface a symbol of achievement, resilience, and the power of patience. Naomi had let him sit in her back seat, let him mock and assume, and now she had delivered a lesson he would never forget. The ballroom doors opened, cameras flashing as VIP guests entered. Naomi disappeared into the crowd, leaving Richard standing there, silent and humbled. He realized something profound. Wealth, power, and respect weren't about arrogance or assumptions. They were about mastery, dignity, and quiet strength. The night sky stretched above the city, full of possibility and ambition. Naomi's presence, her calm authority, and her mastery of the Rolls-Royce weren't just a surprise. They were a statement. And Richard Harlow, for the first time, understood what it truly meant to underestimate someone like her. The Aurora Grand Ballroom sparkled under golden lights. Luxury cars lined neatly outside, but Naomi Lewis remained calm, poised, and unshaken. The city hummed around her, oblivious to the subtle drama that had just unfolded. A man's arrogance meeting the quiet power of a woman who refused to be underestimated. Richard Harlow remained near the Rolls-Royce, still processing the revelation. He had spent the entire ride mocking her, belittling her intelligence and abilities, assuming she was just a driver. And now, he realized he had been sitting in the back seat of one of the most influential figures in the luxury automobile world without even knowing it. Naomi adjusted her gloves, stepped gracefully toward the ballroom entrance, and glanced back over her shoulder. Her gaze met his, calm, yet unwavering. "You know," she said softly, "it's easy to judge someone from their role, their uniform, or their silence. It's harder to see who they really are. The work, the vision, the persistence behind the surface." Richard swallowed, words failing him. The lesson hit harder than any reprimand could have. He had underestimated her, judged her, and yet she had never raised her voice, never demanded respect. She had earned it quietly, undeniably. Naomi continued walking, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, each step a testament to discipline and poise. The Rolls-Royce gleamed behind her, a symbol not just of wealth, but of dedication, resilience, and mastery. "You see," she said, her voice carrying just enough for him to hear, "real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It works in silence, grows in patience, and reveals itself at the perfect moment. Respect is not given. It is earned. And sometimes, it comes as a surprise to those who assume they already know everything." Richard's chest tightened. He had believed himself experienced, confident, untouchable. But in facing Naomi, he realized how fragile assumptions could be. Everything he thought he knew about status, authority, and power had been challenged in one ride. A ride he had thought trivial, but that turned out to be transformative. Naomi entered the ballroom with elegance, greeted by staff and guests who addressed her with reverence. She did not flaunt her position. She simply moved as someone who belonged, whose authority was understood without words. Richard watched from the side, humbled, learning that lesson silently. He glanced at the Rolls-Royce, the car he had mocked, and realized it was never the car that commanded respect. It was the woman who mastered it. The sleek black exterior, the polished chrome, the leather interior. All impressive, yes, but powerless without her skill, discipline, and vision. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, golden streetlights reflecting off glass towers. Naomi's silhouette in the entrance of the ballroom was framed by light, her posture confident and unshakable. She had let him sit in ignorance, allowed him to mock, and in the end, had revealed the truth without a single harsh word. Richard exhaled slowly, humbled in a way he had never expected. The arrogance that had defined him vanished, replaced by awareness, respect, and a hint of regret. He realized that underestimating someone, judging them based on appearances, or assuming their limitations could be the gravest mistake he could make. Naomi, meanwhile, had already disappeared into the crowd of luxury, success, and influence, leaving behind only the echo of her lesson. One ride, one revelation, one quiet display of power, and a man who had thought he knew the world now saw it differently. The Rolls-Royce Phantom sat gleaming under the golden light, a monument to her success, her perseverance, and the dignity she carried effortlessly. But the real symbol of triumph was Naomi herself, a black woman who faced mockery with silence, built her empire with determination, and delivered her truth with calm authority. And as the city lights shimmered around her, one fact remained undeniable. The world often underestimates those who move quietly, patiently, and with purpose. Some rides do more than transport you physically. They change the way you see everything. Naomi had driven Richard not just to a destination, but toward a profound truth. Never underestimate someone's strength, intelligence, or vision. And in that silent, cinematic moment, the lesson settled in, deep, unforgettable, and empowering. Naomi's ride wasn't just about luxury. It was a lesson in dignity, strength, and patience. Never underestimate someone, because the quietest people often hold the most power. If you were inspired by Naomi's story, hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe for more real-life stories from Black lives that will move and empower you.